And what I'm hearing from you is don't worry about
Yeah, because that's where all the trouble starts.
it.
You start thinking about it and you try to know it, right? You try to know it rationally, intellectually. It overpowers the knowing that you've already experienced.
Okay. I believe that God exists
Okay.
because I have had numerous experiences that lead me to believe that.
Okay.
And I
I'm gonna.
choose.
I don't know if you can see it, but there's a group. There's a Zoom chat, so I'm just gonna put the reasons generically there so that we can reference them.
Okay, cool.
I heard you say that you have experiences, personal experience.
Yes.
Okay. So this is great. This is exactly where I want to go. Before you flesh that out, I want to see. I want to just highlight these things. What is another, foundation or reason for your belief other than personal experience? Is there anything else, or is that it? Is that your bedrock?
Choice. Yeah, I mean, I
Choice.
recognize that I choose to believe what I believe.
Huh. Okay.
Like I said, I didn't inherit that. I
For some reason, your volume just got really low.
oh,
I can barely hear you.
How about if I go like this? Can you hear me better now?
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, so personal experience and personal choice. Any other big ones?
Um, yeah, education,
Okay, so
research,
things that you've read, things that you were taught.
right.
Okay, would that all come down to things that are in the Bible or things that are, let's say, culturally passed down as well?
I would say just personal research, not really passed down. I mean, I do acknowledge that there are some things that influenced my belief from my parents, sort of my adopted family,
Okay,
and cultural sort of inheritance, identifying as a Christian. But I didn't really even know what that meant for a long time. So I would say both biblical and extra biblical texts,
okay,
to include other world religions. And teachers. I mean, influential teachers, most of whom are dead, who I don't personally know, but
okay, okay. Anything else? I mean, uh, a lot of people talk about morality. People talk about things like predictions, the kind of things that I brought up with Andrew, predictions that are in the Bible specifically. Um, some people think that belief in God is required to know anything about the world, presuppositional kind of ideas. You know, other people's personal testimonies. I'm interested in what really pushes your buttons. What does it for you?
yeah, I mean, personal testimony is very powerful.
Okay,
But when I say that, I don't mean exclusively, Christian testimony. What I mean is a human being's conveyance of their
yeah,
experiential knowing of a power greater than themselves, as they have somehow experienced what they would call God, in the context of whatever that means for them.
okay, all right. So again, I'm just kind of trying to touch on these. We've got personal experience, personal choice, personal research, and other people's testimonies, and then biblical and extra biblical texts and teachers. Does
Right.
this sound like a good summary of why?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So again, before we flesh it out, I'm going to go back through and we're going to try to figure out which of these are stronger or weaker beliefs in terms of why you believe.
Sure. Let me add one more.
Yeah. Okay.
Desire.
Okay. Oh, yep. So personal choice and desire.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I want to believe that
Right.
there is. You know.
Okay. I think that goes under personal choice.
Okay.
I
Sure.
mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but in some sense that you're getting something out of the belief and so it helps you adopt the belief. Is that a good way to restate it, or?
I don't know that I believe because I feel like I'm getting something out of it, like in return. Like if I believe this now, then I'm going to get this reward later. I don't.
I really just mean that it brings you joy or comfort or life satisfaction or something like that.
Sure, yeah, that's accurate.
Okay. Okay. So let's go back through them, and the basic question I have for each of these is, right, if let's say, let's just go from the end. So talking about other people's testimonies. Um, if you were to find out that all the people you talked to, the different people who had testimonies about a higher power, that they had, if you became convinced that they had been deluded, how would that affect your personal belief? Would it make you less confident?
Um, Maybe. I, I think that the likelihood of that happening would be nearly impossible, but only because the personal testimonies that I'm referencing in memory are both testimonies that I've borne witness to, like was there in the room when someone was conveying it,
Yeah.
but also testimonies that have been written by people that are long dead and mostly forgotten. But you discover things and you're reading things about somebody's experience with gurus and things that have been able to lay down their lives and then pick them up again when they choose to, or astral projection and out of body experiences and things like that. So
Okay,
the
so
likelihood,
I'm hearing that if you found out that they were somehow false, that it might affect your belief, but you don't think it's likely that you would find them to be false.
right? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what about the Bible? If you were convinced, if you had become convinced, let's say a year from now, that large portions of the Bible were not accurate, would that affect your belief in a higher power?
No.
Okay. So see how easy that one was. We can kind of tell that maybe the Bible is not the strongest support for your belief. You see what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
sure.
All right. And you also mentioned extra biblical texts. So are these
Right.
like historical documents or things like that?
Yeah. So
So
leaning toward other sort of philosophies that give deep insight to the human realm, the personal, or the spiritual realm, the interconnectedness of all things. So if you were to go outside of outside of the belief system that a God exists, into something like Taoism, where
Right.
there isn't really a God figure, it's just sort of the Tao, right? And the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. So it's like it's like the thing that is there, it's everywhere, but you can't really communicate it in human words. It's just sort of a thing that you either know and feel, or you're just oblivious to it, maybe.
Okay. So alternative philosophies is kind of what I'm hearing. What
Yeah.
if a year from now you became convinced that these were actually a product of man and not something that described a supernatural God that exists?
Yeah, well, they're 100% a product of man.
Okay.
But they are man's attempts, and I believe this of all religious texts. That all religious texts are mankind's attempts to capture and explain their experiences with a divine something.
Okay, so maybe this warrants a question. Is it possible for people to have experiences that they attribute to something, but they're actually mistaken about what they're attributing it to.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess going back to my question about these extra biblical texts, the idea is that, let's say you found out that Taoism was mankind's, attempt at trying to understand the world, but in fact the thing that they thought that they were describing doesn't exist. Would that affect your personal belief in a God?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. How about personal experience? So you've had your own experiences that you would attribute to higher powers, without going
Yeah.
into them in detail just yet.
Sure. Yes.
Okay, you've had those experiences. What if you found out that you had been misled, that you had been mistaken? Maybe you found out details. Maybe somebody had recorded these events and you watched the tapes. I don't want to get into the details of what they were just yet, but through some means you've started to doubt these personal experiences. Would that affect your confidence in a higher power?
Maybe, but
Okay.
probably not.
Okay. Okay. So I'm interested in why maybe not, but we'll come back to it. We'll circle back. I'm just trying to filter out this list, Okay, so then I think unless I'm missing some things that you want to talk about some more, I think the last one that really seems interesting is personal choice.
Yeah.
This one, I think the question doesn't quite fit. What if you found out that your choice was somehow different? Doesn't make sense as a question. But I guess my question is, how does deciding to believe something act as evidence, or why is deciding to believe something a good reason for believing?
Why is deciding to believe something a good reason to believing it?
If I may, let me actually back up and ask a simpler question. Well, maybe more complicated, but a more basic question. Do you want to believe true things?
Do I want to believe true things? I think the initial reaction is yes.
Okay. Even if those things don't bring you personal satisfaction or happiness or joy or love.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have value in in beliefs that accurately reflect the world around you. Is that what I'm hearing?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So what I'm hearing is that you're saying you're interested in having beliefs that accurately reflect the world, even if those beliefs do not bring you joy and happiness and love.
Correct.
The accuracy matters to you.
Yeah, the accuracy matters.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So then I'm going to go back to the question that I started to ask, which is why is personal choice a good reason for believing something if the accuracy of your beliefs matter?
Well, I don't know that personal choice is a good reason for believing something to be true, as much as it's just sort of the rudiment. Like when you get down to it,
Yeah, that is part of it. Is kind of,
you either believe it or you don't, right? And that's a choice. And you believe it for a number of different reasons, or maybe just one reason, depending on who you are. But at the end of the day, it's still a choice that you're making to believe it. Now, people have cognitive dissonance all the time, and they experience something that's like factually true, and they still don't believe it. Why?
right.
Because they choose not to believe it. They suppress it and they stuff it down, and they block it out or whatever. But it doesn't change the factual thing that happened.
Okay.
They're just choosing not to believe it, whether that's on a conscious level or a subconscious level.
So don't let me put words in your mouth, but
Sure.
maybe what I'm hearing is you grappling with the idea that fundamentally personal choice is a part of your belief, but maybe it's not a great reason for believing something.
Yeah, I don't know that that it's a reason to believe something. I think it's just like part of the process, right? It's part of the
part
belief.
of being human.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then are you comfortable stepping back from that and saying that, that because it's not a reliable way to come to knowledge, that even though it is a part of your belief system, that maybe you should rely on other things to bolster your beliefs? Like, do you want to go towards it or away from it? I guess is what I'm asking.
Towards the belief or
Are
away
you
from
are you interested in believing more things based on personal choice or fewer things? Like, do you think it seems like maybe I'm not making myself clear?
Yeah, I admit I'm having a sort of a hard time to understanding the question. I
Okay.
don't think that we I don't I think it's the order that we're explaining it, right? So I don't think it's like a person says, I want to believe that a God exists.
Okay.
And then they embark on a journey to find factual evidence to support their desire to believe. I think it's sort of the other way around. Like, it starts with a question: does God exist?
Sure.
And then, in seeking to answer the question, one acquires a certain amount of information that allows them to make an informed decision. And that decision is either yes, I believe, or no, I don't believe.
Right. I think I'm with you so far. I guess the thing I'm struggling to understand is I don't hear choice in that description. Right? You have a question and then you look for evidence and
Yeah.
then the evidence either compels you or it does not.
Right.
So I'm struggling to figure out where in that is the personal choice.
Because the individual is, if the well, we have to say if, right? Because we've already said that people can experience something to be factually true but choose not to believe it. So if a person um, chooses to pursue a question about God, does God exist, right?
Okay.
And then along their journey, they acquire the knowledge that says, okay, based on what I know at this given point in time, I can make a decision. And that decision is either yes, I believe that God exists, or no, I don't believe God exists. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the information that they receive is like unequivocally, the deciding factor. The person still has the freedom to choose. So, for example, if somebody was, I don't know, maybe like heavily influenced to be an atheist, maybe they were raised an atheist, right? And mom and dad were an atheist. Everybody who influenced
Sure.
them was an atheist, and so they come out of an atheist upbringing. They're structured by nature to believe that God does not exist, but they never really thought it through on their own. So they ask the question: does God
Yeah.
exist? Well, then they acquire the knowledge, and what they have come to is this conclusion that, yeah, maybe there is a God, maybe God exists, but they choose to disregard that
Right.
information
Okay.
and say, nope, because I'm going to default to everything that I
Sure.
already, right, that I
All right. So
know.
let me try to summarize what I'm hearing. So
Yeah,
the component of personal choice comes into first, which questions do you even investigate, right? Because you might just say, forget it, I'm not interested in going down that path.
sure.
And then once you've started to investigate, it might influence, let's say, the things that you pay attention to. So selection bias and things like that.
Yeah,
I'm going to discount that because it doesn't fit in with what I already believe, that kind of thing.
right.
Okay. Um, but still, still, from 10,000 feet, this bullet doesn't seem like the other bullets to me, because the other bullets feel like evidence, and this bullet feels like a side effect of being fallible. Like this is inherently bias.
It's
sort of okay?
100% biased. Yeah.
All right. So in some sense, I think we're on the same page, right? Like this is part of being human, but we don't. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe we don't want our beliefs to be based on this. Like
I don't
we have
think we
to
can avoid it.
Yeah, exactly. We can't. It's hard to avoid. We can't avoid it, maybe, but maybe we should try, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
Okay, yeah. So I think I'm picking up what you're laying down.
Okay.
So the way that I would word that would be, whether you believe it or you don't believe it, whatever it is,
right,
it doesn't necessarily have any impact whatsoever on whether or not the thing you choose to believe or choose not to believe actually exists.
Okay, all right, fantastic. I think we're in agreement then.
Okay.
Okay, and I think we're in agreement the whole way, because I also agree that it's very difficult to avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so here's let me give you the summary of what I heard. I heard that other people's testimonies and your own personal experiences are the strongest pillars of your belief, because those are the things that if you started to doubt them, you would doubt the belief itself. Does that seem like an accurate summary?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So we went through this list of different things that you use to justify your belief, and the two things that stood out were other people's testimonies and experiences, and your personal testimonies and experiences, because those two things, if you started to doubt them or question them, it may have an effect on the confidence of your belief. Whereas we like things like the Bible or extra biblical philosophies don't seem to have such a strong influence on your confidence.
Yes, and yes. Yeah. You can say.
All right. And interesting enough, both of those were maybes. They weren't yeses. They weren't yeses. So I guess maybe the first question to tease at this is it possible that you have a belief that you can't get rid of? Is it possible that you have a belief that there's nothing you could learn, there's nothing you could find out or discover that would change that belief? Because even these two strongest things you gave maybes to.
Yes. So, are we at the point where I explained the maybe yet, or are we good?
Yeah, sure. Let's stick with your personal testimonies. Would you say of the two that maybe is stronger, or? Well,
Yes.
Actually, you just okay. All right, great. All right.
So my personal experiences,
Right.
What I would call experiential knowing, right? There are these moments in time that really, human language doesn't capture what it is that to make the experience. I can't share the experience with you in human language to the point where you would feel what I felt or know what I knew at that point in time.
Right.
And so, like, if we were going to,
you don't even have to try. I mean, because really we can talk around this. I think until it becomes obvious that we need to dive into it, it may be best to talk around it.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to, we could certainly talk around it. If you wanted to give it a label, it would be like the Buddhist equivalent of like samādhi, right? This high knowing that is largely experiential, that you're like, dude, I don't know what this is, but like I am feeling this something, right?
Okay.
And I can't deny what I'm feeling. I can't turn it off. It's clearly happening, and maybe that's as far as you go with it, because if you try to explain it any further or start putting labels on it, then it starts getting convoluted. But yeah, I mean, so the reason why I say maybe is because I think that these states of what some philosophies would call enlightenment or nirvana or things like that. I think that those are states of knowing. I think those are states of knowing that a lot of people experience throughout their lifetime, and they probably don't even know that they're experiencing it in maybe that context, right? But I'll give you an example. If you are you go to Glacier National Park,
Okay.
and you take the Sun Road all the way to the top, and you're sitting in a valley, and it's just the most picturesque, pristine,
Yeah.
place that you've ever been, and you're sitting on a cliffside, and you're overlooking this glass lake, and it's just perfect. Everything
Yeah.
in the moment is perfect. It's serene, it's balanced. You don't want to be anywhere else. You're not thinking about the past. You're not thinking about the future. You're entirely present in that moment. And in that moment, you feel nothing but bliss.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about the closest thing that you could get to being in nirvana or enlightenment that we read in some of these other scriptures like the Vedas and the Upanishads and things like that. So
Yeah.
So do we experience these things? Yeah, I think a lot of people,
Yeah.
even atheists and agnostics, would say, yeah, I've felt
Oh
that
yeah.
before.
Yeah.
So
I don't think there's any doubt that people have these experiences.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So when I say maybe, it's because I've felt those things. I've felt them a lot in my life, and the more I continue along my journey, the more frequently I feel those things.
Yeah.
So let's say, so I will admit that I suffer from PTSD and
Oh, I'm
anxiety,
sorry.
right? I'm not, but thank you. Uh, let's say that my anxiety were to get the better of me, and at the extreme, I wind up in some mental institution, and I'm heavily sedated, and the straitjacket and the whole nine, right? I don't think those places even exist anymore, but let's just go with it.
Okay.
Um, at that point in time, I would think that I would really be questioning my reality, right? I would really be questioning my sanity if I'm in this place
Okay.
because of my behavior or things that I've said. But at that point in time, it doesn't change any of these other experiences that I've had in my life, right? These moments
Okay.
of bliss and these moments of feeling like deeply connected to something
Right.
greater than myself. So I say maybe because if you were to start unraveling, these experiences, um, it doesn't really change what I've experienced before, right?
Yeah. I don't think I have any problems at all with the idea that I know the feeling you're talking about. I mean, I don't doubt it for a second. What I am curious about is it possible that the thing that you attributed that feeling to might be mistaken? Like maybe
Sure.
there's a different explanation for that feeling.
Yeah, maybe it's just a really kick-ass place, and I'm just feeling really good because I've never experienced this place before, and it's like, or I'm sitting on my
Sure.
surfboard and the waves are rolling in and it's
Oh
sunrise
yeah, yeah,
and the dolphins swim by, and I'm thinking, this is the most beautiful place on the planet, and
yeah,
all the hair on my body stands up, and I'm
yeah,
feeling
yeah,
like so connected to life
yeah.
and energy and everything around me. Maybe it's just that and nothing else, right? But in my
I
mind, I attribute that to something higher, like a God state or uh, you know,
yeah.
that.
I have these same feelings. It's funny because I grew up on the coast of North Carolina,
Okay.
and I used to surf in high school, and even now 25 almost years later, sometimes I still have dreams about being on the ocean, and that feeling is just amazing. It's just bliss and calm and peace and you're right, connectedness. It almost feels, yeah. So I know the feeling. But I'm wondering, if we were to ask other people, I think a lot of people have experienced this kind of feeling. But what I see is that different people attribute it to different things.
Sure. Yeah.
And I wonder, how could we tell who's right? What's the best way we can use to figure out which of these different attributions is the most correct? Because after all, we're after truth, right? We're after an accurate reflection of reality.
I mean, are we?
Well, I asked you. You said that accuracy matters to you. Am I?
Sure. Accuracy matters to me, but it doesn't really matter to me that somebody else sees my actuality as true.
Sure, but I guess where I'm coming from is those people's testimonies, right? Because add me to your list. I have had this experience as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Your personal testimonies and these people's testimonies of these experiences. My question is, how do we figure out what is the best way to explain these things? Because I thought we were on the same page about the idea that we want our beliefs to accurately reflect reality. We want our beliefs, right?
Yeah, right.
In some sense, I don't care about your beliefs. I care about my beliefs, and you care about your beliefs. You don't care about my beliefs. And we're just two people talking, trying to use each other to improve our own beliefs, right?
Yeah.
And so if we look around at all these people who have these experiences and they all attribute these experiences to different things, what mechanism can we use to figure out accurately what these things are actually attributed to, should be attributed to? Does the question make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I mean, my only answer is a question, which is why do we need to do that at all?
I guess because personally, and I can't speak for you, of course, but personally, I want to understand the world around me. I want to know where these feelings come from because these feelings seem so important. And if it seems important, then I want to have a better understanding of it.
Okay.
Does that resonate with you, or actually you're coming from somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly resonates with me. I think that's sort of the drive, right? Like,
yeah,
like you want to know because you felt something, and
right,
you want to pursue that to understand what it is that you felt.
right,
And of course, it's always difficult to try to define it because it ends up being the elusive thing. It ends
sure,
up being the thing. It ends up being the Tao, man. The Tao
sure.
that can be named is not the Tao. So, but we want to do that a lot in the Christian world and in the Muslim world and in most mainstream religions that aren't cool with just letting the mystery be the mystery and letting that thing be the beauty in it all is recognizing that, like, and I don't know what this is, but it is something beautiful, and I'd like to experience it again. I don't know that I need to track it down and label it and put it in a box and
Yeah.
sell it on eBay, but man, that was a cool feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So okay, I heard maybe two different things here. Let me see if I understand. It almost seems like maybe you're a little bit conflicted one way or the other. That
I'm deeply conflicted.
I get that impression as well, but about this thing in particular, on the one hand, I think as a human we're naturally interested in oh shit, what's that, right? What's that coming from? What's that about? Where'd that come from? It's sort of a natural reaction.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's a piece in just allowing things to be. right? I think this is a big part of Eastern tradition is, the world is what it is. Don't, if you strive to attain happiness, you will forever be unhappy.
Yeah, right.
Right. And just let things be as they are. And so there's almost an inherent conflict between these two positions. And I'm hearing that a little bit in what you're saying.
I think on the surface there is, yeah. I think you can certainly see a conflict in there. I don't personally. I think there. I think there's many layers to that thought thread. I think initially there is conflict because you want to know more, you want to define it, you want to understand it, but some people come to the realization that like that's sort of an impossible task, right? And even if you did understand it, even if you were like, I get it, you can't. I couldn't call you and be like, Chuck, dude, I figured it out, man. I got it, right?
Yeah.
And here's where I was when it happened, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
Don't you get it now? You'd be like, no, I don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, I, in some sense, fundamentally, like half of the stories of the Buddhist tradition are about exactly what you're saying, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And there it is. I mean, that's it perfectly. And I think that's totally compatible with Christianity too, because it's always about the experience,
But let me play the devil's advocate.
Sure, go ahead.
So I hear you, and I really buy into the same idea that if you live your life trying to be more concrete, to like try to obtain happiness, you're going to be forever missing the boat. But at the same time, it seems important to me to try to understand the world because it affects our actions. Our beliefs affect our actions. That's kind of the whole point of me doing these conversations is your belief in this thing, whether you attribute it to the Christian God or whether you attribute it to the oversoul, it changes how you should interact with other people. It changes how you should live your life day to day. Would you disagree with that? That the pursuit is a strong word, but the pursuit of nirvana versus the pursuit of God's love are two different actions.
Are they?
Well, maybe that's my question. My question to you: do you think they're actually the same?
Yeah.
So, what do you do when the teachings of one philosophy come into conflict with the teachings of another philosophy?
I note it. I note that, again, I go back to the experience thing. I go back to the notion that, Siddhartha Gautama was on his own quest to attain enlightenment.
Right.
To be the holiest man of all holy men, right? Studied under all these various schools. Like, yeah, maybe this is it. Nope, that ain't it. Okay, on to the next, and on to the next, and on to the next, until he was finally under the Bodhi tree, and like, there it is.
Uh-huh.
There it is. And then, of course, you've got the after effect, right? You've got the after the historical Buddha and the discipleship and the doctrine and the text and all these things that are captured after the fact. Just like Jesus. I mean, just like Jesus, not like Muhammad though. Because Muhammad was like answers like to write down, right? But yeah, I mean, when one tradition comes into conflict with another one, I just say, okay, like that was that dude's seemingly. I mean, we're led to believe based on the text because that's all we have, right? But like, did it really go down like that? Could it have gone down slightly differently? Like, story being told and
so let me put a finer edge on this question.
Okay, go ahead.
Make it a little more cutting, right? Because what I'm hearing is we can look at these major traditions and we can look at their commonalities, and they have a lot of commonalities.
Oh,
in
sure.
terms of how we should live our life. That's what I'm hearing from you. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Although yeah, yeah.
But
Let's say,
there are definite differences. If I talk to somebody who is a devout and fundamentalist um, Muslim, they might think that dying for your belief is the biggest reward. I mean, that is the thing that will bring you closest to God.
sure.
And so there is an important factual question here. Is our life best lived dying in the pursuit of our God's goals, or is our life best lived, in the service of others? And so it seems critically important to actually figure out where the feeling that you're pursuing comes from, because in fact these beliefs are in conflict.
Yeah. So I will point out that both of
There's
those.
a little. Sorry, I really hate to interrupt, but it's a little bit hard to hear you again.
Oh, sorry, man. I was leaning back. I was just taking it
Chilling.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So inherent in both of those statements that you just made is
Yeah.
sort of the notion of should, right?
Yeah.
Should we
Yeah.
be striving to be closest to God, or should we be living our lives in the service of others?
Yeah.
And that's all. Those are both loaded because it depends on what you
Oh
believe.
yeah. 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 I
You know?
said it was going to be a sharper question, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so how do I answer that? I mean, if you're asking me literally to choose between one of those two things, I would say that it isn't one or the other, but a both and. And furthermore, I think that one, I think that both of them are interdependent on one another. I don't think that you can strive to be close to God and neglect other people, and I don't think that you can um, genuinely care for others and humanity with the sort of love that would enable you to be truly effective and not be close to God. I think they're so close and so similar and so interdependent that they're symbiotic.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'm gonna come at this from a completely different angle.
Okay.
I'm hearing that you see a lot of commonalities among the major belief systems in different people, and that there's something about them that resonates with you when they focus on connectedness with other people, and being kind and good and supporting and seeking love and encouraging love and things like that.
Yes.
First, is that accurate? Okay, good.
Yes.
Um, all right. Here's the question. What are you getting out of a belief in the bodily resurrection of Jesus that you couldn't get without that belief?
Uh, well, here's the thing. I don't believe. I mean, I believe that. Um, let me phrase it like this.
Sure.
If the resurrection didn't happen, it wouldn't change very much for me. So I don't know if it's as much that I'm like getting something out of it. I think that's just an added layer of mystery for me. Like wow, that happened. That's pretty nuts, man. Like, I mean, that changes a lot, right? That's sort of like takes it of someone from being a non-believer to a believer in the
It's
sense that
a
like,
pretty it's a fantastic event.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it's undeniable, right? But
Yeah.
yet we still see biblical evidence even that people who knew of the resurrection still were like, no way, man, like that didn't happen.
I guess what I'm trying to come at this is that people who follow the Eastern traditions, whether it's Taoism or Buddhism or whatever, they don't have this belief, and they still seem to be on the same path that you're on. So I don't understand. I guess I don't know any other way of saying it. I don't know what this does for you. I don't know why you are. Let me try to say it a different way.
Sure.
When you tell me that you feel connected to the universe,
Yeah.
I don't hear in that any specific reason why Jesus Christ must have resurrected.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I wonder, how are you getting from there to that?
Sure. Why? Okay. Why is Jesus? Why Jesus?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm going to transition from the front porch to
Sure,
inside
okay.
in my office. All right. So why Jesus?
Right.
You know,
How do you get from these experiences to that specific belief?
I think initially it's the familiar bridge, right? It's what I grew up hearing most about, and it's what I have put the majority of my time and effort and energy into seeking and understanding.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I think of Jesus as like God, when I think of Jesus as the Son of God, when I choose Jesus because Jesus is the embodiment of the, the best human, right? Like fully human and fully divine. In the person of Jesus, you see God's original intent for humanity, to be all loving, to be loving to the point where you're crossing all boundaries. You're going against uh, your own comfort. You're
Yeah.
embracing the pariahs. You're embracing those who others cast aside. You're going into the dark places to reach people who are so hopeless and so lost, who have no love in their life, and you're loving them, right? Not just a superficial love, like, yeah, I love you, man, wish you all the best, but like a genuine love, a self-sacrificial love.
Yeah.
And so, Jesus is the only historical religious figure that I'm aware of, besides maybe, the Howla from the Baha'i faith, who was like that kind of a dude, you know? So why Jesus? Jesus is my guru because of those things. I fundamentally who I think brings out the best
Right.
of humanity. You know?
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. What I what I what I personally can't escape is just the question: does it matter if he actually existed? It seems like he's a great role model, right? It's a great story, it's a great aspiration, but did he have to exist for this story to be powerful?
I think so. Yeah. In order for it to be powerful, his existence had to have he had to have existed, because otherwise it's just like, any other hero from any other story that you're like, man, that dude had it going on. That guy embodied
Sure, sure.
everything.
Enkidu,
You
yeah,
know, but one is an idea, and the other is, if you believe it, factual evidence that human beings can rise above whatever sort of circumstances and constructs that we've been born into and limitations that we inherit, and we can be both.
Yeah. But so then I'm back at the question that I asked you, which is how do you get from personal experience in an interconnectedness to knowing that fact that Jesus Christ existed and lived and died for our sins?
So I think we're talking about two slightly different things, right? So
Okay.
when I talk about experiential knowing,
Uh-huh.
experiential knowing that God exists, right? Well, what we're going to call God, like this supreme energy, whatever that is that we feel when we're sitting on our surfboards in the ocean, totally connected, or we're at
Yeah.
glacier,
And
or we're
the wave comes under you, and you feel like you're a part of everything. Yeah.
yes, right,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's an experiential knowing where you're energetically feeling, and there's something deeper within you that just resonates, right?
Sure.
It's energy resonance. The
Sure.
energy that is around you is resonating with the energy in you, and if you believe like I believe, it's all the same energy. It's all the same creative energy. If we all were created by one God, then all things and people and matter inherently have God in them. So I think when we're feeling those moments of interconnectedness, it's you're just all frequencies are resonating at the same pitch at the same time, if you will.
Okay.
If you want to explain it that way, and you're just like, this is it. This is Zen, man. This is Zen. Now, how do we go from that to Jesus? Jesus was a dude who was like, that was the fundamental message.
And I don't dispute that. I agree that the story resonates with that same frequency. But my question is still, how does the one act as evidence that this specific claim is the true claim, as opposed to, you know, for example, the Jews don't believe that Jesus was God. Jesus was maybe a prophet, but he wasn't necessarily the Son of God. And so it seems like there's something much more specific that we need to figure out the details about this.
Yeah, yeah, and that's, I'll admit, that's an area that is still, you know, sort of up for debate in my own mind, and mainly because, I believe that I don't believe in biblical infallibility or biblical inerrancy. I
Okay.
do think that there are, contradictions in the Bible, and that things have been rewritten and reinterpreted, and not to be malicious necessarily. I mean, maybe
Sure.
that's the case in some later writings, excluding certain people, excluding certain books from the Bible. I mean, exterminating entire sects of early Christians, like the Gnostics and the Cathars, because they didn't believe
Yeah.
we believe, right? Whoever the majority of the authority was. But I do think that there's some things that are still shrouded in mystery, like when Christ said, uh, he always referred to God as my Father, right? And if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Father is in me as I am in him, and remain in me as I remain in you. And it's all about this interconnectedness, right? It's all about this, like, let's be one, the oneness that exists, that has always existed, but for whatever reason, call it the fall of man, original sin, and those terms are loaded as well. They don't mean the same things to everybody, but somehow we've become disconnected. And the fundamental thing is reestablishing that connectedness. And so the whole message was about how to reestablish the connectedness. Believe in me, like I am the Son of God, right?
Yeah.
Well, does that mean that, like, the exclusive Son of God, like, we're not all sons of God and daughters of God? Is there more to it? And
Uh-huh.
we read into it what we want to read into it, and it's been explained, the same way over and over and over again to the point where it's become doctrine. Is there more to it? You know what I mean? Like, Because if you look to the scriptures and extra biblically, there's evidence that supports that, like, we're all sons and daughters of God, right? If God created humankind, then we're all sons and daughters of God.
Sure.
I'll just stop there. I don't want to ramble, but
Okay.
does that get at the question?
I'm trying to figure out. So I guess I look around and I see a bunch of different stories, a bunch of different narratives that could all fit with the same evidence. The piece of evidence that you and I both share is actually this feeling. And I can imagine that the story of the Judaic tradition, the story of the Christian tradition, the story of the Hindu tradition, the story of a completely secular tradition, if you will. These all seem to fit the piece of evidence that we have. I can see them as fitting. I can imagine them fitting. And so I'm left with no way to choose amongst them. I have no way of knowing which of is it this one, is it this one? Maybe Islam is better, maybe Mormonism is better, maybe Judaism is better, Jainism. I mean, right, there's 4,000 different religions. Let's say there's 10 that are super popular. And I just don't see how to, I hate to come back to it, but I don't see how to get from the feeling to Jesus Christ died for our sins.
Yeah. So atonement is really complicated, right? Because you've got so many different denominations and preaching different ideas of what atonement is. You've got.
Well, there's people who don't believe Jesus existed.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
totally.
Or that he wasn't a God figure, that he was merely a prophet. I mean, both Islam and Judaism don't consider him to be God.
Right.
He's a prophet, like Moses was a prophet.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm interested in figuring out, right? Was Jesus the Son of God? And I don't know how to get from there, from the feeling to that, because that seems so specific.
Yeah. Well, I guess I don't know that it, and this might be heretical within my own context, but I don't know that it really matters in the sense of, like, you have to believe this or else.
Yeah.
Right? That there's sort of this retributive nature to God that, like, if you don't follow my commandments or you don't believe in my son, then you're going to go to hell, right?
There's certainly Christians who do believe that.
Oh, absolutely, man, definitely.
And so I guess I'm back to this is a really edged thing. This matters. Figuring out whether a belief in Jesus is critical matters tremendously for some people, for some beliefs, right? Like, that is the difference between, for some people, eternal salvation and eternal damnation.
Right.
And so, like, I want to know. I need to figure this out. How can we figure it out from the feeling?
Yeah. So this is how I would explain it, right?
Okay.
Like, when you feel the feeling, you've arrived.
Okay.
At least in that moment in time, there's some energy resonance in you that knows inherently, without any explanation needed, that it's okay, right? And when I say okay,
Yeah.
it's like that all
Yeah.
the unknowing and the uncertainty and what happens when we die and like all the questions, the huge questions that just sort of are all up here in those moments of clarity and serenity when you're just totally connected.
Yeah.
All those questions just naturally seem to dissipate, right?
Agreed.
They're not there.
Agreed.
Uh,
Again, I agree with your experience. I've had the same experience.
right. So it's almost like you got to flip them around. Like everything that all these holy people throughout time and history have taught disciples and either written about, or people have written down what they've said that later became religious texts. It's all pointing to that moment, that the moment of interconnectedness, the moment where you really truly know without any doubt that you and God are one, that you're one with the divine, that the divine resides in you, and that you are a part of this symbiotic thing that exists in the world. And so Jesus is pointing to that, right? The Bible is pointing to that. The Quran is pointing to that. Like all these things are pointing to
Let me try to push back on that a little bit.
that. Okay?
So, I feel pretty confident that we've had the same experience. Um, but is it necessarily the case that because we feel safe, that we are safe?
No.
So if that's the case, if we can't trust the feeling to be accurate, how again can we how are we free from worrying about whether or not works is the way to salvation or belief is the way to salvation?
You just got to let it go.
This is the single most important question in the infinity that lies beyond. And what I'm hearing from you is don't worry about it.
Yeah, because that's where all the trouble starts. You start thinking about it and you try to know it, right? You try to know it rationally, intellectually. It overpowers the knowing that you've already experienced.
Okay, all right, but let me go back and say again what I think you're agreeing to.
Yeah.
What I think you're agreeing to is, despite the power of this feeling, despite feeling safe and feeling interconnected and feeling peace and calm and everything is gold, it's possible that that feeling itself is not accurate, and that in fact there is a shark underneath the water right at this moment looking to take a bite out of you.
Yeah, is it possible? Sure. I mean, you can fabricate that by taking ecstasy. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay, yeah. So people say that by taking different substances, right, that they can get to the same experience, whether LSD or MDMA or whatever, psilocybin, and they have similar kinds of experiences. If that's the case, I mean, do you give those accounts credence? Do you?
absolutely. But
Okay.
I will say though, I'll pose the question. You know, is are these drug-induced states of elevated something?
Yeah.
Are are the drugs allowing somebody to get to that sort of feeling of interconnectedness more quickly, sort of like a shortcut, if you will?
Right.
Or
Right.
are these experiences, uh, are they similar to these drug-induced highs? Because if you look at the research conducted by Timothy Leary in the 60s, or 60s or 70s, I can't recall, I think it was 60s, but, he brought in all these high meditators from the East
Sure.
and, gave them a bunch of acid
Yeah.
and sat them in this room and was like, okay, go. And these monks and folks were like, yeah, okay. got it. I experience this pretty regularly when I meditate.
Yeah.
And Native American cultures and religious rituals and things use ayahuasca
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
peyote to relinquish some of these inhibitions that we naturally carry around with us to free ourselves in order to experience these elevated
Sure.
states of knowing.
I've don't. I've read accounts of shamans in Mexico, and some of it sounds very similar, but some people are convinced that when they feel like they can fly, that they can fly. It seems critical to figure out whether they can actually fly, whether they become a crow and can fly across the land, can jump out of the tree and fly across the prairie,
Yeah.
or whether that's a feeling.
Yeah, so I would say both, right? And the reason why it's dangerous and fundamental for people who take acid to understand if, like, when they feel like they can fly because they're on acid, can they really fly?
Right.
It's because they've taken the shortcut, man. Like if you are not, if you're not, if your posture is that where you are naturally living in a rhythm of connectedness with all things, right? Or you're striving to be that. You go forward and backward or whatever, your progress is whatever it is. But if you generally live with a posture of peace and serenity in your life, and you are meditating and you are, reaching these elevated states of consciousness and you're experiencing more frequently, then you're sort of like training, right? Like, and through your training, you're able to discern what these new feelings are and how to handle them. And when you're feeling that connection, it's not this new radical thing.
Sure.
Opposed to, Josh at 21 years old, who's like zero, spirituality level is zero, and I eat a bunch of acid and I go out into the woods and I'm like, man, I can fly, I'm turning into a crow,
Right.
Because even in that language, we still sense this feeling of interconnectedness, right? I see the crow, I am the crow.
Right.
Am I the crow? I mean, literally, no, I'm not the crow. But am I the crow in the sense that the crow and I are one and that we share the same creative energy and I can feel this interconnectedness? Yeah, maybe.
This
Shortcut is dangerous because it doesn't give the person the posture or the experience to deal with the experience that they're having.
So, but just to make sure we're clear, I just want to make sure I understand you. If you don't take the shortcut,
Yeah.
right, and you're living your life in this way, can you fly?
I've never met anybody who can fly.
Okay. Okay.
But I will say that I have read. If you've never read autobiography of a yogi or autobiography of a guru, I can't remember the title, but it's by Paramahansa Yogananda. And if you read that book, man, there's a lot of like pretty outrageous stuff in there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
One of those is like dudes flying around, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I've never seen anybody who can just fly on their own accord.
Okay.
But David Blaine can levitate, right?
Well, okay. Do you believe that David Blaine can levitate?
I don't know.
Are you?
It seems like he can, right?
It certainly seems like he can. Are you really at 50-50?
I want to say no. I want to say like it's an optical illusion because my rational mind says that all magic is just, it's an illusion. But go back, right? Go back in time. Is there something to magic? Is there something to illusion? Isn't this all just an illusion of some kind? I mean, it really tests the boundaries of what you think you know. And it certainly defies the laws of physics.
So just to make sure that we're on the same page, what I'm hearing from you is that you're not completely convinced that David Blaine can't do real magic.
I don't know what real magic is, man, but whatever David Blaine is doing.
Let's stick with can levitate of his own accord.
Uh, because I don't know how he does it, it is a mystery to me. And so I can't say one way or the other if he can levitate for sure or not. My rational mind says no way.
Which way would you bet if you had to bet $100?
I would bet $100 that he probably cannot levitate.
Okay.
But I can't deny what I see, right? Because what I see is what I know. It's that clash of like.
Sure. So there's a thought experiment that this makes me think of. If you go into the kitchen and let's say you're married, right?
Yeah.
Your wife has left a pot on the stove and it is boiling. I mean, it's bubbling and steam is coming up and it looks it's glowing red, right? Everything about it tells you that it's boiling.
Yeah.
But she's left a thermometer in it and the thermometer says 32 degrees Fahrenheit. What do you make of that, right? What's the most parsimonious understanding of the scenario? Is it either that the laws of physics have somehow changed and something can be boiling and freezing, or is it that the thermometer is broken?
The latter all day.
Okay, so when you see, I'm sorry for laughing. When you see David Blaine levitate, is it more likely that it's a trick and you don't know how the trick is done, or that he has learned how to fly?
Definitely the former. Like,
okay.
How is the guy doing this, right?
Okay. I'm just trying to, because you seemed hesitating. You seem to hesitate. And I kind of wonder, are you at 50%? Are you at 90%? Are you at 99%? Like, how likely is it that he's flying?
I'm like 99% sure
Okay.
that he's not flying.
Okay, great.
Because I don't fully understand this,
okay,
I have to leave room for the possibility that, like, I don't know, man, maybe this dude just figured it out and like he's got the whole world.
Fair enough.
Because check it out, right? Like, there's also experiments where, somebody will take a prosthetic arm,
okay,
and do these touch experiments where,
Sure, yeah, I'm familiar with them. I've seen them, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And they're talking about phantom limb experience.
Yes, exactly, right. So you can't necessarily trust everything that you see. Is that a fair thing?
I am in complete agreement with that.
Yeah.
And that gets me back to what I was asking, which is, can we trust this feeling that tells us everything is safe? And is it possible that actually while the waves are coming under us and we're part of the wave, there's actually a shark nibbling at our toes and is ready to take a bite?
Yeah, I think that's totally a possibility.
So if we can't trust the feeling, what can we make of the feeling? Where can we go from the feeling, right? Because to really go back down to what we were talking about, I heard that you were saying one of the reasons that you can come to Jesus, that you came to Jesus, is the idea that this feeling says, look, don't worry about it. And here's a guy who embodies everything that seems to ring the same bells. But if we can't trust the feeling to be accurate, how can we make that leap?
I think you have to really trust yourself, right? And that's dangerous because of all the things that we've already discussed. Like, how can you trust?
Do you trust yourself?
Yes.
Implicitly?
And
in
no.
every... Okay.
Yes and no, right?
Okay.
So if you're familiar with, Jung. Talk of the shadow self, the shadow side, doing shadow work and things. Every person on the planet, as a general statement, has some sort of shadow side, like these things about ourselves that we suppress and we shun and we hate even and we dislike, and so we just lock those things away, right? And we think that we're just getting rid of them, but in reality we're not, because those things wreak havoc on our subconscious, and our subconscious affects our conscious, which affects our subconscious, and it becomes this vicious cycle. So do you trust yourself? Yeah, I mean, I trust myself as much as I can, consciously.
Yeah.
But I'm well aware that there is this.
Yeah, this goes back to one of the first things we talked about, right? The fact that inherently as humans we are, you know, bias confirming animals, right?
Yeah.
We have these beliefs and we kind of, oh, I'm not going to pay much attention to that because it doesn't fit my beliefs. And
Right.
so I thought that what we got from talking about that for a little bit was that maybe we shouldn't trust ourselves. We should actually be vigilant to make sure that we're not engaging in those mistakes.
Yeah. So, and that reminds me of a verse of scripture, right? Lean not on your own understanding, but trust in the Lord completely. Well, how do you do that, right? Because it's not like you can have this conversation with God where you're like, hey, God, like I'm really struggling with this decision, and I trust you implicitly. Like, help me out here, right? Like we can't do that, and so that only leaves us different ways of knowing. And the most powerful way that I've ever encountered in my life is the experiential knowing. There's no other knowing that I could convey that has been that powerful. So the power of the knowledge itself, right? And this could be deconstructed all over the place, and I'm well aware of the holes that exist in the statement. But like, if I know something rationally, if I can grasp something intellectually, then it gives me a certain level of understanding. But when that level of understanding has reached its maximum, the only other thing greater than that is some sort of experience that either confirms that or just obliterates it entirely, right?
So,
and then it makes you question all kinds of stuff.
Maybe I've misunderstood something, but have you had a personal experience of Jesus Christ?
What does that mean? Like,
well, we were talking before about the feeling that you get at the top of a mountain or on the crest of a wave.
Yeah.
Jesus was a person.
Right.
Those seem very different to me.
Yeah. So the way to explain this might be through the Trinity, right? God as three people: God as Father, God as Son, God as Holy Spirit. So we're talking about some sort of energy resonance, and this is I'll always go back to this because this is sort of the root foundation, right? If Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me," we make that a very exclusive statement traditionally and historically.
Right.
But I don't think it's exclusive at all. I don't think it's like, unless you believe in me, Jesus, that I am God's Son, then you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity. I don't believe that for 1 second. I think that.
How can we tell? I mean, we have these two competing views.
Yeah.
Right, because there's plenty of people who do believe that.
Sure. Right.
How can I, an outsider, a third party, figure out which of you is correct?
You got to do your own research and come to your own conclusion. And I'll be the first to say, and I tell this to people all the time: if you're coming to me for answers, you're already missing it. You're missing it.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I'm definitely not coming to you for answers. I'm coming to you to understand. I'm personally deeply fascinated with how people came to believe what they believe.
Yeah.
And because I look around and people believe all sorts of stuff. And some people are so convinced of it that they're willing to hurt other people in the pursuance of their ideas.
Yeah.
Fervent, deep beliefs.
Sure.
And I find that fascinating. And so I'm just trying to figure out, you have this belief. It doesn't sound like you're fervent. It doesn't sound like you want to hurt anybody in pursue it, but it seems like something that is part of who you are.
Yeah, so let's go back to my very first statement. The thing that I said, I don't know if there's very many absolutes, but the one absolute that I will always default to is love wins every time, right? Because Scripture, the Christian Bible says God is love. John 11 says if you don't know God, it's because you don't love God. And you can't know God unless you love God, right? So there's this distinct, unbreakable tie between God and love. God is love, right? God is love. God is love. We hear it over and over and over again. Now, that creates a problem when we're looking at Scripture as a whole between Old and New Testament, because you've got God who's wiping the earth of people, God who's jealous and angry and condemning, and supports dashing babies' heads against the rocks.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you said that yourself. You leaned true that there was a biblical flood, and babies died drowning in the flood,
which doesn't present a very loving God,
right? For Jesus to do something like that seems counter message to the New Testament.
Exactly, and that's my point, is that Jesus was a dude who, he didn't just talk the talk, right? It wasn't like, hey, here's my teaching, go do that. Quite the contrary, he was like, he came to be with us, right? Of 33 some odd years that he was on the earth, his ministry was 3 years long approximately. So what was he doing for the remainder of his time?
Right.
He was just hanging out, being a human being, right? Being with us, showing us, teaching us. Hiking, surfing, right?
Yeah.
Like, being human, being tempted, being angry, feeling emotion, and I think that's beautiful, because when you talk about love, when you talk about a God, the kind of God who is unfathomable, right? Hatred is fathomable. Like, we can understand hatred. We can understand hate and rage and pain and all the negative things, right? And we tend to hold on to those things a lot easier than we do to love. Love is so elusive for so many people, right? But love is the constant. Love is the only thing that can break those terrible things down. And to give an example, why Jesus, right? God, there's something called kenosis, right? And kenosis is just this really heady term for an emptying, a self-emptying. And if God emptied God's self of God's deity status, right, to come down, you want to put a direction to it, right, to become his own creation in a human being, and then empty himself further when he was a human being to the point of death, to come back from the dead to prove how much God loves people. There isn't a message out there that is more powerful than love. Now, when we talk about atonement, why did Jesus die? And how does Jesus clear up all the sin of mankind and like all of that? It really gets sticky, because you're talking about different understandings, right? Like I mentioned, a retributive God. And you either have sort of a retributive mindset of God or a restorative mindset of God. And the two are not compatible. The substitutionary atonement theory is retributive. God sacrificed his own son so that you, Chuck, a sinner, would have this way to bridge the distance, to bridge this gap between you and God, to get right, because Christ sacrificed his one and only son, right? By loving and believing in Jesus, that like clears away all your sin, your cosmic debt, all that stuff's gone, right? Yeah, I think that's a bunch of hogwash, man. I don't believe that at all. I think God, in God's infinite love for his creation, that in its disconnected state, there was a need to show people that love, to reveal the love that God has for humanity. And you can't just talk about that, right? Because you can talk about it all day long, but until somebody says, let me show you what I mean. Just let me show you, right? It's the same in the 1960s when the Buddhist monk set himself on fire.
Sure.
You've ever seen that image?
Sure, yeah.
Right? Great photograph, hugely powerful. You could look at that and say, well, that guy was committing suicide, right? Well, was it an act of self-hatred where he wanted to die, or was it an act of self-sacrifice to speak in a way that was louder than human words
Sure,
can convey?
I hear you. I hear you. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but as compelling and powerful and beautiful as the story you're presenting, I still don't understand where the reason to believe it is coming from. Because
Yeah.
just the fact that it's a good story that would lead us to live better lives doesn't seem to me to make it factually true.
Yeah, and here's where your personal experience comes in, right? Because if you've ever felt the pain of hatred or put down or
Sure.
abuse, then you know the distinct feeling of pain and suffering, right? If you've also hopefully been deeply loved and comforted and felt safe, then I think any living organism, no matter what it is going to gravitate towards the safety and the feeling of love.
Sure.
To gravitate towards hatred, right?
And I hate to interrupt you in the middle of this,
Sure.
but in some sense, that's exactly my question. How do we know that listening to this story, we're not just animals seeking comfort?
Yeah. Well, I think we're all born with that inherent mechanism to seek comfort.
We do, but how do we know that it's factually true? That the story that you're telling me is factually true? As opposed to, boy, this would be a comforting belief to believe. It would make me feel better.
Yeah. I think it's like any research, right? Like in any investigative effort in anything in life, when you start to research the things and they make sense to you, you research them to the point where it makes sense, right? And whether that's factual evidence that you saw, with your own eyes and you touched it, and it's real for you, or it's some realization that you came to because of experience, or maybe a combination of all those things. Like, for example, to put it all together, everything that we've talked about so far, you have the question: how do I know this is real? Who's God? What is God?
How do I know that Jesus is God as opposed to Ganesh and Vishnu and Asura?
Yeah, right. Well, ultimately, it comes down to choice, like we talked about. But the factors leading up to that choice are all leading you to some. It's a fact gathering process that you ultimately are able to surmise. Like, this makes sense to me. This makes sense to me, and it resonates deeply within me, and I'm going to choose to believe this.
I'm going to belabor this point.
Yeah.
I hope you forgive me for doing so.
Yeah, okay.
But we talked at the beginning about we do this as people, and we can't avoid it. We can't avoid this personal choice. But should we try to avoid it? Should we try to avoid believing things simply because of our own biases? Or should we seek things that are accurate?
I think that if you're asking me my personal opinion, I think it's a paradox. At the end of the day, it's the paradox, right? It's this Buddhist sermon right here.
Okay.
What is the one thing, the secret of everything?
Uh-huh.
And this is the answer, right? This is the answer that the teacher gives. a person who asks the question, many people come to the master asking, what is the secret of life? How do I know? And the teacher always gives this answer. But one day the teacher isn't there, and somebody comes and they ask one of his novice monks, what is the secret?
Mhm.
And having seen the master give the answer, the novice says, it's this.
Uh-huh.
Well, out of nowhere, the master jumps out and cuts the finger off, right? And the guy runs away crying. The next day, he goes to the novice, the master, and he says, tell me, what is the secret of everything? And the monk holds up his stump and he says, exactly. It's the concept of Wu Wei, right? If you're familiar with Wu Wei, you know what that is?
Not by name.
Okay, so Wu Wei in Buddhist philosophy is doing without doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea that an archer who has got the arrow drawn back in the bow doesn't say to himself,
Sure.
release the arrow, right?
Right.
He just releases the arrow.
Yeah.
And so in the same way, and this is why meditation and prayer are so fundamental to this process, because in the stillness, right? Be still and know that I am God, if you want to put a Christian bent. In the stillness, in the quietness, when you've relinquished all your inhibitions, whether that's through some sort of psychedelic aid or not, in the ground of your being, inherently, you just know. But but it's a paradox, because when you know and you've had that intellectual and rational connection to the spiritual connection that you get all excited, right? Things are aligned. They're aligned to the point where you're like, dude, I'm feeling it. I get this. I get it. But it's so elusive. It's like the finger, because as soon as you get it, you
Sure.
lose it.
Sure.
But it's always there. We don't accept it, and we're always seeking it. But we've had it all along. It's always been there.
Is it possible that Jesus is the finger? That you think you've got it, but in clinging to this particular tenet, you're missing a greater picture.
Dude, you just like encapsulated Jesus' entire, like the epitome of his message, right?
Uh-huh. Okay.
What did he tell Mary Magdalene at the resurrection, right? Don't cling to me.
Okay.
Don't cling to me.
Okay.
Don't cling to me.
So
Don't start a religion.
I ask of you, Josh.
Yeah.
Do you cling to Jesus?
I cling to Jesus in the same way that I cling to any other, historical, philosophical teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that's a pretty good place to stop.